Okay.
Uh, Howdy, everybody. This is old 86 back again. Uh, I thought I'd go ahead and continue a little bit on my life. At least I think it's a very interesting life, and I really enjoyed my life. So, to get back to the story, I just got out of the Navy. Let's see, that was 2 years after I turned 18 and went in. So 18, that's 9, 20, that's 20, 1920. And what I would like to do is, you see, I had 2 wives in my lifetime. And my first wife I met about a week before I went in the Navy, and she lived in Horseshoe Bend. I mentioned Horseshoe Bend, that's about 30 some miles like that, north of Boise, Idaho. And we lived out on the farm. That's a 40-acre dairy farm. You know, if you remember, where I took care of 16 cows, which I had to get my younger brother to help me because it's a lot of work milking 16 cows by hand, and there's more than I can handle. So I was getting close to 18. Well, 18 is a real famous age for people that don't want to go in the service. Because they make you go in.
Yeah.
Yeah, they sure do. So 2 days before before I turned 18, my father sold the 40-acre farm and bought another 40-acre farm right up next to the city limits of Boise. And he bought an electric milking machine. So, wouldn't you know it? So anyway, that was, you know, his business.
Right.
I was going to have to leave the house there when I turned 18. Well, about 2 days before I had to leave that night, he showed motion pictures in Horseshoe Bend, and I'd been visiting with a girl up there the last couple, no, I hadn't. I think that's the first time I met her that night. And it was love at first sight. And so, well, that's what it was. We made love. So, well, I found out, or she decided that she wanted to get married, and so she went home with us to Boise, and we got married that night, and the next day I went down and went in the Navy. Well, this was timed real nice. What is it? Is it 6 months or 9 months when it takes to have a baby?
9 months.
9 months. Okay, 9 months. She came to visit me, and I, of course, I knew before then from the letter writing that we had a baby. And it was just about Well, a few days after 9 months, she came down. Well, it's to Chicago. I'd still going to that school in Chicago, and my oldest daughter lived in Chicago, so we stayed with her. My oldest sister married a professor of the University of I guess Illinois or Chicago, or I guess it'd be University of Chicago or something, but it was a big university there, and he was a chemist and worked with the government on the development of exotic missile fuels.
Huh.
So he must have, I don't know when he went to working for the government, but he must have been making good wages, because he lived in a 4-story house. Have you ever saw a 4-story house? Well, that's what it was, really. And it was right on the edge, well, just beyond the edge of the limit of the campus of this university. And there was a whole bunch of them, and well, a whole row of them on there. They probably went farther and more of them, but what it was is 4 stories, but the lot was just as wide as the house. No, there was room to bring a car in between the houses.
Huh.
But it had a nice backyard, and it was a nice house. And the backyards in almost all the houses was really landscaped. I mean, it wasn't no shack. And so we stayed when my wife came to visit us. Of course, we stayed up on the 4th floor. That was nothing exciting or nothing, but just to explain the circumstances. And of course, we had a nice visit for that and a couple of days, and then she went back home, and I, about that time, was continuing in my Navy career.
Right.
So about 9 months after that, she came to visit me. Well, I had 2 kids then.
Right.
Well, about 9 months after that, she showed up in San Diego, and we had another night or 2 visit. So I had 3 kids all together, and I hadn't hardly even saw them, you know. But they was nice kids and a good wife, and it was fine. So now, when I got out of the Navy, times was really rough. It was one of these times when this country of ours was in kind of a depression or hard time, you know. And it was really hard to find a job. But I found a job that was rare to find too. I found one working for a construction company that was building a business. It wasn't a business, well, yeah, it was a business. It was a creamery that sold milk. You know, they'd buy the milk from farms and stuff, and they sold milk and made ice cream and things like that. So they was building a new building, and so I got a job wheeling cement in a wheelbarrow. Well, you all know what wheelbarrows look like.
Right.
And I had to push that wheelbarrow full of cement, and they filled it clear full. And of course they didn't like you to drop a wiggle it or nothing. You had to get up an old rickety boards that they'd put up there to get up to the second floor. And I got it up there without spilling the drop. Well, maybe a drop or two.
Mm.
But I didn't waste much of it.
Right.
And so I worked that for a couple of days, and I said, well, there must be something better than this. So I quit that job, and I got a job at a person that had bought a lot of surplus. There was a lot of surplus stuff on the market then. And you could buy electronic tubes by the shovelful. And that's the way he did. He'd get a whole two-wheel trailer full of them. And he bought a lot of electronic equipment. Mostly of that electronic equipment was equipment to cure things, ailments, sickness in people. And so he hired me, and so I fixed and made sure and checked out and calibrated these machines. And the way the machines was supposed to cure you of different diseases was that different frequencies are supposed to cure him, according to him. And I guess he must have been a doctor. I don't know. He called himself a doctor. And what you did, they'd put pads on your arm if you had an aching arm, and shoot the juice to it. And it's supposed to cure it. Well, anyway, I fixed all his machines up, and I guess he didn't need me anymore. So I got a job at a TV repair shop. Ah, that's more like it. And the test equipment they had back in those days was just big things, you know, awkward. And if you went to check something, you had to, all you could do to pack your tester.
Right.
Well, when I was in the Navy doing all that school and testing things, because in the Navy school, we had to test a lot of times because the instructors would put problems in there, and it was always a contest to see if they could put a problem in there that we couldn't fix, you know.
Right.
Well, that was the same problem in the Navy. All the test equipment was big, usually on wheels, and you know. So I says, "Why the heck was that?" So I built me a little tester about the size of a pistol, and it was in the shape of a pistol, but it had the probe out the end of the barrel, and I could get into all that stuff easy with that little tester.
Huh.
And I had the indicators on there that would tell me what frequency and so forth. So I could track most anything, because most of the electrical pulses and signals is determining what they are, is where they are in the machines. Right. And that. But when I got out of the Navy and they x-rayed our sea bags, they took it away from me. They thought it was a gun.
Huh.
And I couldn't tell them. No. Anyway, they didn't let me keep it.
Right.
So when I got a job with this TV repair shop, after I worked with that quack doctor,
Right.
well, he didn't seem to know much of what he was doing and so forth, but he didn't have nothing but a big old tester, and so I went into the electronics store, and they had available just a smaller tester, about yay
Right.
by yay, well, by about yay.
Right.
Yay! So, what it was really nice. It was up to date. It was really a TV set. It had a little cathode ray tube about that I could see what I was testing for. And if we put up, and he'd put up antennas, I could just hook that up to the antenna and it'll read the signal strength and everything. Well, it was that and the signal tracer, and
Right.
I could use the scope also to look at test forms, pulses, and just tell everything. And that was really good. And but I didn't get very much pay. Really hard times.
Right.
And my wife, was living with my folks, and she wanted to get out in her own apartment. And I don't blame her, so that's what I did, and we found us a nice little apartment. See, up on the plateau, there was an Air Force base or Army base. I never did find out whether it was Army or Navy, but it didn't matter. They
Right.
also had a municipal airport up there.
Right.
It might still be there, but anyway, I knew they'd have an employment office up there, so I went up there, and boy, sure enough, they had a job for me. And this job sounded real good, because see, at that time, that's when Russia had told the world that they had the nuclear bombs.
Right.
So our government, boy, they really got in a priority time program of building a radar site from Seattle, Washington to Maine,
Right.
to completely cover every inch of space between us and Russia. So, and I don't know who I was working for, what part of the government, or whether it could have been a private contractor, but it must have been the Army, because they told me to drive the truck.
Right.
The truck was one of these big military trucks. I don't know whether you've ever saw one, but they've got actually on each side the double wheels.
Right.
So 4 big wheels, and they're big wheels. And what it was a shop. That was whoever I was working for. I had a boss.
Right.
And he gave the job of driving that truck up to the borderline, Canadian border. Well, on top of that truck, and what that truck was for, it was for the crews that went to all the different military air bases back on the northwestern part of this country.
Right.
To the airports, and did repair work on radars and
Right.
communications equipment and stuff. Well, on top of the bus, on the truck, it was a workshop. And we had room to haul parts and stuff. But on top of the truck, they'd put a wooden box that was this square, that was higher than the top of the truck. Well, maybe about like that.
Right.
And it was as long as the truck was, and what it was, it held spare parts for radar antennas.
Huh.
So anyway, I hired in, and I could have took my wife and the 3 kids,
Right.
but it'd been pretty hard. It was winter. Well, not in the middle of winter, but close to winter time.
Right.
And some of the men took their own cars in our crew.
Right.
They took their own cars and wives. They was allowed to do that because they paid us per diem. And you know, that per diem was good. It was enough for us to eat in restaurants and live in hotels or motels and have money left over.
Right.
I forget how much it was, but people back then was only making what, $1.50, $2 an hour, working that hard labor construction, wheeling cement. I was only making about $2 an hour. And here, heavens, just the per diem, let alone the salary. I got a regular salary, and so I didn't want, well, with 3 babies, I just told her that's what they should have to. I'd just take this job as long as I could, until I could get a job where I wasn't going to travel.
Right.
You know. So I went ahead up there, and we ended up on the Canadian border on a, well, you saw these movie westerns. It was a little town that had about, maybe 6 buildings on both sides of Main Street.
Right.
And the rest was kind of rolling hills and then the border.
Right.
There's a lot of mountains around, but with this particular big radar dome that they put up, it was just kind of rolling hills. And that's the kind of radar, you saw probably pictures of these big radar domes. Okay, we was going up there, and I was driving and everything. It was pretty exciting. 2 gear shifts, and well, I could drive it. What the heck? They just had to tell me what to do to start with.
Right.
After all, I was raised on a farm. I wasn't no sissy.
Right.
So anyway, we came to this little town about 100 miles before we got there, and it was low on gas. So we came to a big town. It must have had maybe 16 buildings on each side of the road.
Right.
And they had paved streets and several gas stations. It was a big town.
Right.
And the first one I saw off the side of the road on one of the side roads. So I turned and went there, and they had a line of cars. They had a line of cars in line waiting for them. So I said, well, I'll have to go around and see if I can see another, and then before we get, maybe we can gas up quicker.
Right.
But I got to the corner there and turned this way, and that whole lot, there was a whole lot bare behind that gas station, and it looked like 2 tracks where cars had ran across and around in that lot, and down around to get to the gas station.
Right.
Okay, so I took that. Well, I didn't, it was all clear. I didn't see these power lines going across there. 3 of them, you know.
Right.
And I didn't know that I broke them when I went around to get to the front of the gas station. I didn't see the lines, and I didn't hear them break or nothing.
Huh.
So I got around there, and the lights was all out at the gas station, and I just said, well, they must have closed. There's a lot of cars still there. So I just went on around, we found another gas station and went on to, and you know, I never heard nothing about it.
Huh.
Until maybe 5 years later, the FBI caught up with me.
Huh.
And, well, I'll wait till I get into what kind of work I was doing when they got me. Anyway, we gassed up and got up there, and well, it almost had all the radar stuff in and that. And my job was to get the communications equipment in. Well, they showed me in a vacant lot. You could look down, like from the vacant lot, you could look right down Main Street. And they said, okay, we want a 90-foot pole out here in the middle of that lot. And we got the poles and stuff and everything, so have fun, let's get that pole up. And they said, got a stick and put it in the ground and said, that's where we want it. Well, I looked at the men I had and, oh, you poor guys. I says, I wouldn't put that on anybody, so I decided I'd climb up it myself, and I had to tell them how to pull it up and everything. Well, it just made common sense. I'd never put up a 90-foot telephone pole before.
Right.
So I found some smaller poles, telephone poles, and on each side of the line going to where mine was, I had them dig a hole, and we put these smaller ones in, because we could handle them.
Right.
And so I had what they call that. There's a name they got, a gin pool or something. They've got a name for that kind of a guy thing.
Right.
So I had a man stand out here, and then the rope went up the top of it, so it went down to our big pole. And one on the inside, and then I had a couple men with ropes to hold it and steady it on
Right.
the side. And so I tied it on that big truck, and we just pulled it right up, and it fell right in the hole we had. No problem. Well, look who was, you know. Oh dear. Well, why not?
Right.
Yeah, you know. But then I'd never climbed a pole before, and they had these here things that put on your legs with a metal spike coming out there.
Right.
And that's what I had to climb up there. And, but I really didn't mind. I was a little leery about it, but I really didn't mind, because back on the farm we was so used to swinging and climbing in the barn, and we had a big derrick that we'd put a rope on there, and we'd get on top of the barn and swing around. You know, it was all right. Anyway, I climbed up on that pole, and I started to, well, I was working on it, and I heard a bunch of dogs barking. And you could look right down Main Street, and off 2 blocks away there's a big pack of dogs heading this way, raising the dust storms. That was just a dirt road.
Right.
You know what was chasing that dogs? It was a small mountain lion or cougar, something, but it was just a small one. And I was chasing this whole pack of dogs.
Huh.
And they was heading straight for the pole. That's a good entertainment. I had to watch them. And they came running right to where it was past the last building and turned north. Well, it was northwest or something like that.
Right.
It's kind of an angle. And then disappeared over a hill. So I went ahead and I was working for a couple of, maybe an hour, and I heard the dogs again. And those dogs was chasing the cat this time.
Huh.
The cat came almost to my pole and back down the main street and over the little hills. Well, I enjoyed that. It was interesting. So anyway, evening it came and I went down there, and one of the buildings had made into kind of a coffee sandwich little place there for workers.
Right.
For all the steel workers and radar people and the pole putter up people. So we went in there, and they had a little baby cougar or something. It was about that big. And one of the steel workers had it on his shoulder, and he was petting it, and that baby cougar was just a purring away, man. Just a pretty scene, you know, like petting a baby, which it was, I guess. But then we all got doing what was doing, and all at once that steel worker let out a yowl, just screamed, and that cougar evidently wanted down. And the steel worker didn't want to put it down, so it took off his ear.
Ouch.
Yeah, he just took his ear right off. Well, we got that all up and finished the job and went back home. It was a couple weeks, you know.
Right.
Maybe a month. Civil service jobs, you know how they are.
Right.
So I got back home, and my wife wanted to get into a better apartment, a bigger apartment, and so forth. And